In 1975, Sandy Ann Spencer was an 18-year-old senior at Carl Hayden High School. She lived at this home at the time. Sandy and her longtime boyfriend planned to be married after she graduated. Sandy was a quiet and hard-working student. She worked at Jack in the Box, located here in 1975. About a year or two later, the Jack in the Box moved not far from its old location, but where it stands today, which is the corner of 35th Avenue and McDowell Road. Sandy wasn't the kind of person who accepted rides from strangers. Back then, there were a lot of hitchhikers, a lot of guys asking women if they wanted a ride. It was well known that for the previous 4 to 5 years, there were a number of women who were found dead in the desert outside of Phoenix in various areas. Sandy didn't have a car at the time, and she usually got done late, but she always had a ride home set up. On Monday, December 29th, 1975, Sandy went in for a shift at Jack in the Box. She told her father she was getting a ride home from another coworker. Those she worked with that evening were expecting Sandy to get a ride home from her sister. As Sandy's sister would later say that even though she would occasionally pick Sandy up, Sandy hadn't asked her for a ride in over 2 weeks. When her shift ended and she was getting ready to leave around 12:30 in the morning on Tuesday, Sandy said goodbye and walked out of the Jack in the Box. Sandy never made it home. Her parents discovered she was missing at 11 a.m. Over the next 2 days, as people were celebrating, ringing in the new year, Sandy's friends, her boyfriend, and her family were on edge. They were hopeful, but feared the unimaginable. On Thursday, Sandy's body was discovered in the desert, 2 miles south of Whitman, Arizona, about an hour northwest of Phoenix. She was nude. She had marks on her wrists, ankles, and face. She had been raped, bound, and gagged. She had 19 stab wounds in her pubic region, causing a vaginal tear. A sewing needle was embedded in her left breast. Her cause of death was asphyxiation. She suffocated to death because her mouth and nose had been filled with dirt and taped shut. The only thing she was wearing was a class ring her boyfriend gave her. Detectives tried to piece together a timeline of the moments when she left Jack in the Box, with the various accounts that she had told everyone of having a ride home. The public was urged to report any finding of her clothes, including her name tag, her Jack in the Box uniform that she was wearing, a brown suede jacket that she had on, a Mexican flowered handbag that she had. This photo in the Arizona Republic shows Sandy's boyfriend at the home of her parents the day after her body was found. With another unsolved death of a woman whose body was found in the desert, police desperately searched for links in each case. In the fall of 1975, 14-year-old Neva Lee was a freshman at Sunny Slope High School. She lived at this home with her mother and stepfather. Neva had a history of running away from home, and she had so many absences at Sunny Slope High that on January 5th of 1976, her mother and stepfather withdrew her from school. Neva's mother would later say that she did well in school up until about 2 years prior, when her mother and stepfather, a 61-year-old Phoenix Tree Service Company owner, got married. Her mother said that she was enthusiastic about the marriage, but afterwards refused to accept the authority and discipline of her stepfather. She liked to stay out late, would sneak out of the home, and ran away a few times. Because of this, her mother set up counseling sessions with a psychologist for her and her daughter. On Wednesday, January 21st, Neva and her mother went to a counseling appointment in this area at Central and East Catalina. During the session, Neva said she had to use the bathroom. She never returned. Neva had run away. Her parents began to worry when she didn't return home after a few days. When her friends said they hadn't heard from her either, and to fear the worst. On Monday, February 2nd, a body was found in a desert area south of South Mountain on the Gila River Indian Reservation. 3 days later, identification was confirmed. It was Neva Lee. When she was found, she was nude. She had been bound, raped, and had stab wounds in her chest, her abdomen, her breasts, and in her vaginal area. Her cause of death was suffocation because she, too, had dirt stuffed in her mouth and in her nose and taped shut. Neva's family and friends were devastated. Because she was found on the Gila River Indian Reservation, the FBI got involved. They determined that the murders of Sandy Spencer and Neva Lee were connected. A few weeks after Neva Lee's murder, Two detectives, one from the Phoenix Police Department and one from the Sheriff's Office, reached out to an Arizona State University professor, Dr. Lloyd Herring. He was a geographer. Based on his experience, they wanted to see if he can narrow down where this killer might live by looking at the evidence and the locations of where the bodies were found. They wanted his help in finding a territorial criminal. Professor Herring, after visiting various locations of where each body was found over the last couple of years, mapping out and reviewing all of the information, he said the following: "In general, there appears to be almost no similarities among victims in their habits, personality, residence, friends, jobs, lifestyles, or other cultural environmental factors or conditions. The only exception to the above generalization is the spatial variable. All 5 of the victims probably passed at or near the corner of 35th Avenue and McDowell on the day of their abduction and subsequent murder." Because of Professor Herring's territorial theory, the location of the killer was pinpointed to a small area. One suspect was Joseph Clarence Smith. He was 27 years old. He was on probation for a double rape in 1973. He drove around in a former police car with a police monitor in it. It was at that point that Smith was put under surveillance. With the information Professor Herring provided, on Sunday, February 29th, police determined that Smith would be passing by the corner of 43rd Avenue in Missouri. So they put a policewoman, Donna Crow, in the area to pose as a hitchhiker and get picked up. Incredibly, while under surveillance, Smith drove by and spotted Officer Crow. He pulled over, words were exchanged, and Crow got into his car. Crow asked to be driven to 43rd Avenue in Thomas, where she told Smith that she was going to meet her boyfriend. He drove her there and let her out, and 2 hours later at 43rd Avenue in Virginia, Crow waved Smith down when she saw him drive by. This time, she asked him for a ride to 35th Avenue in Van Buren. She told him that her boyfriend was at that location in his truck waiting for her. Smith agreed to give her a ride. Crow got into his car, and they headed down the street. Smith drove her to the location, and he helped her look for her boyfriend's truck. The reason that Officer Crow had once again attempted to get picked up and succeeded was because Professor Herring had said that territorial criminal can be expected to become aggressive in his own territory. Outside of his own territory, he may not be aggressive. And since during the original ride that he gave her, he didn't try anything, they wanted to give it another shot in his territory. When they arrived at 35th Avenue in Van Buren, they both looked for the truck and they couldn't find it. So Smith had asked her if she wanted to go back to the machine shop where he worked, and she agreed. Smith drove west on Van Buren and pulled into this location. At the time, this was the Astro Machine and Tool Company, which was owned by his father and where Smith worked. This is at West Van Buren and 40th Avenue. This is the location as it appears today. With police still following her every move, the two went inside the shop. While inside, they talked. Smith told Officer Crow about a race car that he was building and asked if she wanted to see it. The lights didn't work and the garage was dark. Smith told her to feel the upholstery in the back seat. Officer Crow bent down and felt it. When she got up, Smith grabbed her arms and pinned her back against the car. She told Smith to take her hands off, which he didn't, telling her he wanted to talk to her. It was then Officer Crow gave the signal for the other officers to come in, which they did. She broke free and ran out, and Smith was arrested. Police discovered that in 1973, Joseph Clarence Smith was arrested and charged and later convicted of 2 counts of rape. He was sentenced to serve 2 concurrent 1-year sentences in the county jail and 5 years probation. Now, a week after his arrest involving Officer Crow, a Phoenix woman identified Smith out of a lineup the previous year, February of 1975, when she was 17 and pregnant. He was indicted, then examined by 2 psychiatrists, and declared competent to stand trial. A few months later, Smith was found guilty and sentenced to a total of 90 years and had his probation revoked. Officer Donna Crow, having gone undercover risking her life, testified at a hearing for false imprisonment charges against Smith. The charge was later dismissed at the request of the county attorney in the interest of justice and saving money. The sentence Smith could have gotten for that wouldn't have mattered, he said. Before Smith went to trial for the 1975 rape, in early March of 76, not long after his arrest, a search warrant was executed at the Astro Machine and Tool Company where Smith worked. During the search, they discovered a map, and on it, the exact location where Neva Lee's body was found had been circled. A second map was found, and this one had the location circled of where Sandy Spencer's body was found. Police also found a scalpel knife with blood on it, a blue plaid coat with fiber material like the material found on Neva Lee's body, a blood-stained packing blanket, which had white fibers on it, which were also found on Neva Lee's body, along with white dog hairs similar to those found on Neva Lee's body. Smith had 3 dogs at the time, one with light hair. The shoe size also matched prints found at both locations. With the evidence they found, Smith was questioned about the murders of Sandy Spencer and Neva Lee. He denied ever seeing or knowing the two. When questioned, Smith's father said his son was too busy with legitimate activities to have done the killings. Son of a bitch. All of the evidence against Smith was sent to the FBI lab in Washington. In late September, 2 weeks after Smith was sentenced to 90 years, he and another man were charged with kidnapping, rape, and assault with intent to commit murder in connection with the abduction of a completely different Phoenix teenager in July 1975. This son of a bitch bastard. The victim said that she was hitchhiking and was picked up by the 2 men. She was driven to the desert where she was raped, stabbed in the stomach and back, and left for dead. After they left, she was able to make it to the road and flag down a passing motorist for help. The other man, David Michael Miles, pled guilty. He was sentenced to 22 years, then was released after 11 in 1988. That makes sense. Smith was found guilty and sentenced to 190 years. After the evidence came back from the FBI lab, police had enough to officially charge Joseph Clarence Smith in November of 1976 with first-degree murder in the deaths of Sandy Spencer and Neva Lee. He was not charged in the deaths of any other victims whose bodies were found in the desert over the last couple of years. This is because there were not enough similarities to tie him to the deaths of those victims. The trials for the murders of Sandy Spencer and Neva Lee took place in 1977. He was described by a psychiatrist as a sadistic murderer who found pleasure in inflicting pain on his victims. Smith did whatever he could to buy time and avoid responsibility. He led detectives to different areas of the desert where he claimed somebody buried bodies there but never did find anything. He even blamed Neva Lee's murder on another man, a man who would testify in the trial, and claimed that he knew Smith, but he was not with him at the time of the killing, and he had never seen Neva Lee. Aside from the evidence mentioned earlier, a watch that Neva Lee had been given by her mother was found in Smith's possession. Tire tracks also found at the scene matched Smith's car. Smith was found guilty of first-degree murder in Neva's death. Smith's ex-girlfriend was going to testify in Sandy Spencer's trial that he had given her Sandy's coat as a gift after the murder, but in an attempt to protect her from the ordeal of testifying, he pled guilty to first-degree murder in Sandy Spencer's death. When he abruptly did this during the trial, his ex-girlfriend ran from the courtroom crying. 1 month later, he said he lied when he pled guilty to the murder of Sandy Spencer. He said he only pled guilty to protect his family and friends from further harassment. He said police and prosecution officials threatened to have his parents arrested for tampering with trial witnesses. He said, "I was under a lot of emotional stress at the time. I haven't been guilty of any of this stuff. And they knew it, but this court isn't after the truth, so I figured, what's the use? I thought I'd save others the trouble." The assistant county attorney said, "In all the years I've been a prosecutor, I have not seen many people who deserve the death penalty more than this man." Joseph Clarence Smith was sentenced to death. He appealed and was sentenced to death again in 1979. In 1999, the U.S. Appeals Court overturned his death sentence on the grounds that his lawyer had been ineffective during the second sentencing hearing. Smith was resentenced to death in 2004. So years of additional appeals, things being overturned, resentences, and as one justice put it, constitutionally defective sentence proceedings have led us where we are today, nearly 50 years after the murders. Smith is still alive and still on death row, even recently arguing that it would be considered cruel and unusual punishment to execute him after so much time has passed. Neva Lee was 14 years old at the time of her death. She was survived by her parents, a sister, and 2 brothers. She was born in China in 1962. There wasn't a lot of information about her, but she was described as a very smart and talented girl who was well-liked by everybody she knew. The burial site for Neva Lee is unknown. Sandy Ann Spencer was 18 at the time of her death, and according to her obituary, she was active in junior achievement and the school chorus. She was survived by her parents, 1 sister, and 1 grandmother. She is buried at Phoenix Memorial Park and Mortuary in Phoenix.